Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode here at Catholic Table Talk Podcast. This is the podcast where everything Catholic is on the table. Once again, this week, thank you for joining me via Zoom, or beyond Zoom, via YouTube or Facebook on our video platforms, or any of our audio platforms like Spotify, iHeart Radio, and that type of stuff. If you don't know which platform we're on, make sure you check out the description box below. We have all the platforms listed down below. Also, check out our webpage as well. Also, today's episode is brought to you by Dr. Katrina Wynn. Dr. Katrina Wynn is a physician and medical doctor. See how she can help you and your family out at mdkatrina.com. She can also be found at mycatholicdoctor.com. Thank you for Dr. Wynn for sponsoring today's show. And let's get on to today's show. This is a very, very cool topic. At least that's what I thought. And it's faith and military service. We have had the guest on before. He is a very well-spoken, great guy, and I love him to have him back on the show. He appeared back in episode 47. He talked about the end of times, the Catholic view of that, and I found it really, really interesting and engaging. And again, that was episode 47, The End of Times with Mike Creavey. He's a Catholic author and high school teacher and teacher on the Homeschool Connections where I went to school at. And he hosts a podcast as well. So I always love to have another podcast host join me on here. So let's welcome in for the second time at Catholic Table Talk, Mike Creavey. Mike,
Hey,
thank you so much for coming on. I know it's been a little bit trying to get you back on the show, but thank you for your patience and your dedication to come back on the show.
yeah. Oh, my pleasure, William. And you took the words out of my mouth. I was gonna thank you for being patient with me. So
No
I
problem.
should comment up front that in case anyone remembers when I was on before, I look very different. This is something veterans I think do sometimes. You know, we get out of the military and we toy around with hair and facial hair. So last time people saw me, I was sort of an ill-advised attempt to grow hair out, which I didn't really do so well. But the beard's coming in pretty nicely. So
It
this
is,
sucker is it's a force to be reckoned with.
it is really nice. Yeah, I can't
So yeah,
grow a
it's
beard
great to
that
be
good
back.
yet, but yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so
So
I'm
if
happy
you
to be
want,
back.
yeah. So yeah, again, you want to just talk a little bit about yourself real quickly and kind of what you do and how can people get a hold of you if they want to, get into
Sure.
your podcast.
Sure. Yeah, no, and I appreciate it. It's the podcast, all the stuff I do, you can go to my website just directly, probably is the best way. It's The Gracious Guest, all just spelled out, thegraciousguest.org. Or, you can go to the YouTube channel as well and just click on the link there to subscribe and everything. So but yeah, and I teach I've been for many years now, 9 years, I guess. I've been teaching full-time high school theology and always some ministry stuff in there as well. I was a youth minister for a couple of years before that. I have got my undergrad from Catholic University in Washington, D.C. in history, and then gradually more focused on theology near the end of my undergrad time. And then I got my master's degree in theology from Franciscan University a couple of years back. So yeah, the theology is my enduring passion and interest, but through that, it literally connects to everything from literature to film to basically you name it. And of course, as you mentioned, I teach through Homeschool Connections, which I love to do as well. I've been busy this summer doing interviews for a lot of the teachers on there. So I
Nice.
said I'm busier in the summer sometimes than I am during the school year.
Which is not a bad thing to have if you enjoy it. So
Yeah.
yeah. No, but yeah, just going off real quickly off the homeschool connections things. I have not I didn't take any of your classes when I was a student. But I've heard great things about you and what you teach and how
Oh,
you
thank you.
teach it. And I mean, I just love your office there. It looks so cool
That was
behind you.
fun.
So yeah, it's definitely if you have high school kids, or even middle school kids coming up, get on Homeschool Connections and look up Mike Creevey's courses because again, I mean, he's a
Well,
very yeah,
I'll give them the incentive too, because I have some
okay,
new additions back here of some replica lightsabers. So if you want to see
sure.
those up close, you gotta take my courses. That'll be an incentive.
There you go. All right. All right. Yeah, so let's get on to this week's show, Mike. And you when I messaged you about coming back on the show, and again, it was a little bit to get you back on from just the time constraints and everything. But you told me a couple of different options, and they were all very interesting. But this one really stood out to me, so that's why I picked it. It's faith and military service. Um,
Hmm.
I wasn't really sure which direction you're gonna go, so I put some questions together. And we'll see how it goes. But
Yeah.
really, just for when people hear, faith and military service, um, what is the connection between the two, if there is?
Yeah. Well, and just a little bit about my own brief sketch of just my own background for folks. Not all the details, I could go on forever, but I when I was in college, as I mentioned, at Catholic University, I also did Army ROTC. I have a lot of military background in my family and extended family, different branches, but my immediate family was all Army. They never pushed it on us or anything, but I grew up with I think just sort of a positive attitude in my family, kind of a good um, level of patriotism in the family,
Sure.
and that was just sort of imbued in us, I think, to that gratefulness growing up. And so I think we naturally gravitated towards it, my brothers and I. And I was a senior in high school when 9/11 happened. So that kind of precipitated a lot of things as well. And just a big surge, I think, of folks my age being interested in trying to do something, quote unquote, And what can you do about global terrorism? It's like when you're 17, 18 years old and all of that's going on and no one knows what's really happening, and you have a bunch of people who are already interested in serving. It just sort of made sense. It was I'm gonna sign up, or this has really solidified my desire to sign up, something I'd already decided to do, with this all these question marks, right? And so for me personally, I'm kind of a roundabout way to getting at this. I think for me and for a lot of people I had the benefit of kind of coming in with, I think some of us had maybe a higher percentage um, motivation, set of motivations from the standpoint of service, of being willing to risk your life, then maybe, and this maybe is a bold thing to say, but in some respects, I think there are time periods where maybe there's not as much conflict. Certainly the period before I signed up, a couple years before that, when we weren't involved in as many big conflicts around the world, you'd see a lot of the advertising campaigns emphasizing what you can get out of it, right? Like you can get college money out of it. You can get this out of it. This will give you skills to be a good, businessman someday. And those things aren't necessarily bad, but I think those approaches can tend to draw people to the military who might primarily be looking out, or in maybe a disproportionate way, looking out for themselves and their own career and that kind of stuff. And I think there's some problems with that, potentially, versus a role of service. So, not tooting my own horn, I'm just saying that was a time period that was very much on the radar of like the real risks, the real likelihood, almost certainty of going to war. I was in Iraq in 2008, eventually, and blessed to have been able to come home. And I know several people who didn't, a lot of people who didn't, or came home broken, you know. And so, long story short, the answer to your question as far as the connection between faith and military service, if I think of faith, of course, theologically as a gift, right? It's a gift from God, but I think it brings with it, obviously, uh, implicitly this notion of I'm adhering to something I can't see fully.
Right.
Doesn't mean that there's not good reasons to have faith. A lot of people accuse us of that. It's just a blind leap in the dark because we're not rational enough to do anything else. No, it's not that. You know,
Right.
that's a caricature. But for me, I think there was a taste of faith in a sense. You could maybe call it a secular faith or a more worldly faith, in my nation. In my sense of duty to my community writ large, so to speak. That I am a citizen of this nation. This Can I share with you a quick little
Sure.
catechism quote, short little one I looked up ahead of time. I just
Absolutely.
saw this today. I wasn't looking for it. I came across it and prepping for something else. Uh, Catechism 2240. This is interesting. It says, And there's some things in this little short thing we might not like to hear, but it says
Yeah.
submission to authority and co-responsibility for the common good make it morally obligatory to pay taxes, to exercise the right to vote, and to defend one's country. I thought, whoa, I gotta share that on the show today, you know.
Yeah.
So now, of course, that doesn't mean that those are just completely like endless, you know, or that it's not impossible to be taxed too much, right? For example,
Right.
or to be um, uh, that voting might be in some cases, you know, might be a sham, or you might live in a country where it's just a show, it's not legit. But like this idea and the defending of one's country, well, you got to look closely. How far does that obligation go from the catechism's perspective? If you're a German in 19, you know, 38, 39, 40, what are you defending? You know,
Right.
like is the nation you're defending, is the cause you're defending objectively evil or something like that? So of course, all those things come in. But in general, I thought it's traditionally the church understands patriotism properly understood, potentially military service in defense of your nation. It seems to be under the umbrella of the fourth commandment, kind of extended, right? You know, honor your father and mother, your grandparents, your whole tribe, right? Your neighborhood, your state, your nation. So patriotism at the root of it, you know, the more I've learned over the years, does have you know, definite, I think, clear connections to our faith. You see so many examples in the Old Testament of Israelites that get put in these positions where they have to even potentially take arms, you know, should always be a last resort. But yeah, I think the Catholic faith, as I understand it, you know, has never been, strictly speaking, um, like a blanket pacifism. There's always been this appreciation for, you know, um, the just war doctrine, you know, for legitimate self-defense, all these kinds of principles, which we don't have time to get into all the details, but I hope that gets at some of that first question, as far as, you know, that they're definitely not, from the Catholic perspective, I think, mutually exclusive or anything like that.
Sure.
So
Okay.
um,
No, sound good.
there's a lot there. There's more I've got too we can get into.
Yeah, but I mean, just like recapping, first of all, just thank you for your service. I don't really know if I knew that you were in service or not, or in Iraq. So, first of all, thank you very much for your service. On
Yep.
behalf of the listeners, appreciate that.
My
And
my honor. It was 8 years, which seemed in some ways to last a long time, but now, like, I can't
sure,
believe for I've been out for longer than I was in. And that's weird.
right,
It
yeah,
starts to like drift further back, you know.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm starting to feel that way about high school. So yeah, definitely.
Yep.
And just when 9/11 was, when it was 9/11, I was only like just 29 months old. So I mean,
Hmm.
I really, really dig into the history of 9/11 and everything
Yeah.
because just I was just a baby in my daddy's arms on that day. So
Yeah.
yeah. But I kind of want to go back to on the fourth commandment. This is a pop-up question. Like I said, we can get more into it.
Hmm.
On the fourth commandment, like, can you, I don't know, just kind of like briefly dive more deeply into that? Like,
Sure.
that's based off the fourth commandment, because that sounds really intriguing. That sounds really interesting.
Yeah, yeah, and this is something I mean, I haven't done an exhaustive study of this, and it was only
Sure.
recently for me, a couple of years ago, that I first started hearing it expressed this way, you know, and uh you know, the undercurrents, the deeper sort of theology behind it. I mean, I had noticed before, of course, in church history, you know, you look at even in the Gospels, right? You have Jesus interacting with military people, and he doesn't expressly say anywhere, you know, thou shalt not serve in the military. In fact, I had the quote over here, Luke chapter 3, doesn't really give us a whole lot, right? It says soldiers ask him, Luke chapter 3, verse 14. Soldiers also asked him, and we, what should we do? And he said to them, rob no one by violence or by false accusation, and be content with your wages. So, you know, so like I'm looking at, like, you know, in my time in the army, like, what are, you know, Jesus? Okay, so Jesus says I'm not supposed to rob anybody. Like, it's a
Right.
pretty short list. Like, don't complain about my pay. Okay, you know, it's not a whole lot there. But then you see, you know, him engaging with the centurion, healing the centurion's servant. You have Saint Longinus, the tradition tells us the soldier who literally pierces Jesus's side at the crucifixion then has a conversion experience, and is an early saint. The 40 martyrs of Sebast, I think they were all Roman soldiers who refuse to reject Christ, and they get martyred in this frozen lake. Saint Martin of Tours, Saint Joan of Arc, Ignatius of Loyola, Brother Lawrence, from the practice of the presence of God, had been a soldier in his youth. Saint Camillus de Lellis, and then more recently, you've got Father Emil Capon, in our own country, Father Vincent Capodanno, whose causes are open for sainthood. And so, it's I knew of these stories, but I hadn't really, thought of a deeper connection. I thought it might be like just a cultural thing that, okay, they happen to be in the military, but that's like somehow maybe separate from their faith, or they have to do that in spite of their faith, or their service to their nation is this unimportant thing in the grand scheme of our salvation. But no, I mean, there is a deep and profound understanding here that just as God calls us to honor our father and mother, which means a lot, to, I think at the core of it, to obey their authority, to honor and recognize the authority of those who have authority over you. And as Jesus says, right, Jesus says to Pilate, right, you have no authority over me but what's been given you from above. But he's recognizing that there is an actual authority that's been given to Pilate in this moment. There is a civil authority, in a sense, recognized in the Caesars even, right? Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, And so it's not absolute, but it seems pretty clear throughout the Gospels, the more you read it, that there is, whether we like it or not, there isn't really a gospel encouragement of anarchy. Like there's a gospel encouragement of law and order, of doing your civic duty, of being a respectable, law-abiding citizen. Again, not abiding unjust laws, and there's something to be said for that. But yeah, just I think to me it seems to all fit into that. And along with that comes, if there is a direct threat, to my children, for example, in my house, that there is a series of measures, not only that the church permits for me, but hold on, my Siri just went nuts on me. Anyway, but no, but there's a duty, right? An actual duty, responsibility. People cite the turn the other cheek. Well, Jesus said turn the other cheek. Yeah, but turn your cheek, not turn someone else's cheek that you're responsible for. Like if someone is attacking my children, that's different than if they're attacking. Like if someone's attacking me, I have a certain set of decisions I can make, right? Legitimately, I can resist them using force if necessary to repel it. I can choose to not resist and to be martyred. I can make choices, and it all happens quickly, right? But if I'm, defending a preschool, from a suicide bomber, or I am, like I have a nursing home that's being used as a front for some terror cell, and there's people being abused. Like if I have a level of responsibility and authority by nature of my office, by nature of my fatherhood, by nature of my being a soldier, whatever it is, by nature, if someone's a priest, I think wherever you're at in life, you have some level of authority, right? That God is sharing with you, and that you must do the best you can in your conscience to apply, right, in a moral way. And we would say, like within the military, for example, in the Army, we were taught this under the Uniform Code of Military Justice in the United States, that you're required to disobey an unlawful order. So a lot of people just, you have to follow orders. You're in the military, you follow orders. Well, if someone, if I'm in the middle of a firefight and my major is telling me to like throw a hand grenade, into a school, no, sir, right. I am not going to do. And a lot of that grew out of a recognition in the wake of World War II, how like every Nazi on trial at Nuremberg said I was just following orders. Right. And there was this sense that it's like, well, no, you're a human being first. You are a son or daughter of God, with a a conscience that must be formed. That's first and foremost. So I think, yeah, I'm rambling here a little bit, but I hope that gets at a little bit of there's principles here. They're not completely, you can't use them to justify anything,
Oh, right.
like I blew up an orphanage, during combat because the fourth commandment tells me to honor my father and mother, and that makes me a patriot. No,
Right.
hold on. so, so yeah, but those are the principles, I think.
Okay, gotcha. Well, thank you for that. Sorry about throwing you on the spot there. But I
No, no.
appreciate that. You can get simply a cup of coffee or a drink if you want to. But just going back over that, I mean, when you were talking about that, that reminded me of a movie. It was at the end of the movie, and one of the guys was talking about, like, we gotta defend our children and their children. We don't have to do it for us, but we gotta keep our children and their children safe. So, like you said, it's that duty. um, I mean, again, you can't you can't follow unjust laws, but you have to defend, like America. I mean, you got to defend America because it's the best country on earth. We have the most religious freedoms on the planet. Go a lot of different places in the world, like my priest tells me, and he's like, "Yep, we have religious freedom." And they're
Right.
pushing against religious freedom, and they want, to attack us. Well, we have to push back because, you know we want religious freedom, and yeah. So again, like you
Yep.
said, it's not like we gotta go blow up an orphanage because, well, we gotta do it the way. No, it's if you have to defend it, and yeah. So, but
Well,
yeah,
and
I really, yeah,
can I just add one thing? Because this is,
sure.
a whole new territory of, you know, like I've thought about, I continue to think about these things. I thought about these things when I was in service. I always, continue to reflect on it. Sometimes my opinion of certain operations, that we were part of, and in history, you learn more. It's mistakes are made, that kind of thing, and even sins are committed. But I'll tell you, when your 6-year-old kid says to you, this was a few weeks ago, says to you from the back of the car, "Daddy, what did you do in the army?" And I'm like, "Oh wow! Like, how do I explain that, to a kid? Like, how much do you want them to know about the world and everything?" So my background was military intelligence and psychological operations. Um, and so it's, "Well, honey, let me tell you about influence operations and human psychology." Like, okay. But what I explained to her was, I said, there are people in the world who hate God, and they're children of God too, and he loves them. And we have to pray for everybody. Jesus said to pray for even the bad guys. I'm really simplifying it for her, right? And I said, Daddy's job was to help find bad guys who were hurting innocent people and to catch them. That's basically how I explained it to her. And I think that's as good of a simplification as I can for a 6-year-old. But some people ask me, but, it's funny. You talk to like a seminary or a group of kids, like a seminary retreat or something, and I would help out with, or when I was a seminarian, I would talk about this. And there's always some kid, like, "Did you ever kill anybody?" And, people, I think rightly so, cringe when they think about veterans being asked that question. But at least for me, like, and I think a lot of us, like, we get asked that enough that it's like, like everybody has some way of handling how to answer that. And I you know, was basically telling this group of kids, it was like, not that I'm aware of. Like, I was never in a direct firefight where I know for sure that I took someone else's life, but I participated every day in operations that were directly designed to, and we knew they were successful when they were successful, right? To apprehend or even kill very specific people we knew sometimes by name, targets who were notorious, murderous, wicked people. But like I said, who I firmly believe are still children of God, who through a long series of decisions and influences and demonic influence sometimes went down this path that was just god awful, and that there's no easy explanation. There's no easy way to look at it. And so I'm blessed. I don't lose sleep, over my participation, but I do take it seriously, and I don't take it lightly. And I pray, I would sometimes pray when we were being rocketed, which I'm not tooting my own horn. That's God's grace. Like I'm laying there and there's explosions and I'm faced with this reality of there is nothing I can do right now at all. Like there is nothing, like my life is completely out of my hands right now. And I'm thankful. I'm honest with you. I am thankful that I had that experience when I was 24, 25 years old. Because even now, I gripe and I complain and I fuss and I get all, it's like I may as well not have learned that lesson back then,
Right.
but I can have these moments where I'll remember it and I'll go, that was real. I thank you for that, Lord. Help me not to really ever actually forget the preciousness of life, that we can't take it for granted, that we must pray for our enemies, that there is good and evil in this world that just is so crazy, and it's so, it's all your truth, your good. Like, no. 30 seconds of, being rocketed will snap that out of you.
Yeah, I bet.
So again, I'm rambling again, but yeah, this is such an interesting topic for a lot of reasons. And those are just some things I didn't want to forget to mention.
Well, well, quickly here, Mike. I know we're way out
Yeah,
of time here. What to get to at least one more question
please.
after this, but this is from Fulton Sheen's book. Yeah, it's just kind of daily reflections, and today's reflection, I just want to throw this in there, since you
Yeah.
mentioned it. This today's reflection, the podcast is being recorded, folks. It says the real test of a Christian is not how much he loves his friends, but how much he loves his enemies. So when you said, yeah, pray for your enemies, and like Jesus always said, that's I read that this morning, and that's what reminded me of.
Wow.
So yeah.
Wow.
So
well, and this might get, let me get a little practical if I may, because this, I'm sure maybe was some of what you were wondering about, and maybe some of your viewers and listeners here. Just what's it like, what, because it's, and I'll be honest with you, now I've been out for a while. I have a lot of friends and younger relatives who are still in, so I feel like I'm always kind of getting these stories, but it's hard. It's hard because the fact is there is in that environment, there's a lot of bravado. There is a tendency, maybe it's because of the life and death stuff you're potentially dealing with. There can be a glorification of violence. There can be a dehumanizing of people, right? And then you look at every war ever, right? The slogans that we use, the words we use, words that I sometimes used myself. I mean, I'm no angel. I was very much in that environment. The coarse language of it, sometimes the just immorality that can run rampant occasionally, or more than occasionally. And so it's a very difficult, I'd say it's one of the most, in some ways, one of the most difficult environments that I was ever in my life to really have the courage to live my faith out actively, and not to be tempted to hide it sometimes. However, I was very blessed that early on my faith became known, and every unit I went to, I got flack from people sometimes, but I got a tremendous amount of respect from people too. And that's not, I wasn't doing it for me, but I found fast friends. Some of my most profound spiritual conversations with people, some of the best confessions I ever had, we're in a makeshift confessional, in Babylon, literally, just up the river. I learned a lot about duty. There are a lot of things that dovetailed and that fit with my faith. I got to tell you, one of the most important takeaways I ever got from my military service that's helped me enormously was the realization that, I mostly worked with wonderful people, really competent people, but I met some really, if I can use the word, some really stupid, very just empty-headed, very wicked sometimes people in high levels of leadership, people that I was under, and thankfully that wasn't the norm. But when I look at the church, we look at all the scandals in the church. I'm not making light of them, but listen, you're gonna have that Like so I've never been tempted to walk away from the Catholic faith because of revelations of a really wicked bishop or
Right.
priest, because that's how it works. Like that's how the human race is.
That's what my
Um,
friends tell me. Yeah.
yeah,
So yeah.
like so for me, like I've told people before who were thinking of leaving the church, I said, listen, I'm not making light of it. I'm not making light of abuse. I'm not making light of financial corruption or of just or people in positions of authority that are not clear or are not, they're sometimes like a seeming like milk toast kind of Catholicism. Like I'm not defending that.
Right.
But you don't, there's the old saying, you don't leave Peter because of Judas. Same thing in the army. I didn't leave the army because of one bad colonel or 10 bad colonels or a bad general here or there, um, because I recognize that the office is bigger than the person holding it. And look, if that's true for the army, I mean, it's the army is not divinely protected, right? Like as much as I love the U.S. Army, it's a completely human institution. you
Absolutely.
know,
Yeah.
the church is not. And so that's something I want to encourage people: take heart, not defending, and don't you either. Like, don't defend the wickedness, but don't lose heart. God knows what he's doing.
Absolutely.
Yep.
I mean, yeah, like you said, it doesn't matter what. eh, I mean, scandal and stuff is in everything, everywhere you go. It's not just in church. It's not just in the army. It's not. It's everywhere.
Mhm.
No matter where you go. So yeah, and it's really depends on. I mean, it's not how bad you fall. It's just how you pick yourself up from that and strive forward again. So yeah, we're about our time for today's episode, Mike. I know we haven't gotten to any of all the questions. So we'll have to have you back on the show and do part two if you're willing to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So yeah, just real quickly in a couple minutes we got left. Just where can people find the show again? And you got anything new coming up on Homeschool Connections this fall?
Sure. Yeah. Well, just let me just add one brief little thing real quick.
Yeah.
That's just a takeaway, maybe a placeholder for the future, is that, at the end of the day, I think the biggest lesson that I've learned through all of it is um, that good and evil, the battle, the war between good and evil, that's the only war. I
Right.
have to make a Star Wars reference. I have all this stuff over here. Episode 7, right? Force Awakens, and Maz Kanata says something like that when they're at her place, and like, she says something about like the war. And I think Finn says, "What war?" She's like, "The only war, right? The light side and the dark side." Like, forget, Empire, First Order. No, no, no. There's one real battle going on, and that battle, it's in the church, it's in our society, it's in the military, it's everywhere. So, being the best Christian you can be, that's that's the most important thing wherever you are.
Right.
So that's just something I want to mention. Yeah, the Gracious Guest is the YouTube channel. thegraciousguest.org is the website. I have 2 courses coming up this 2023-2024 school year. What I'm working on right now. Fall semester is going to be a Catholic social teaching course, specifically the Didache series of texts from Midwest Theological Forum, which are wonderful texts. So it kind of follows that particular approach. I think Mike Aquilina wrote that book. And then the spring's going to be a course on ecumenism. I've never taught before. So ecumenism
Really?
and interreligious dialogue. So they're 12 weeks, every Tuesday for 12 weeks, about an hour long, and going kind of through those texts. So that'll be interesting.
That'll be fun. That'll
Yeah.
definitely be fun.
We can
All
talk
right.
about those too when the time
Is it
comes. So
exactly? No, we can. No, like you said, Mike. Like you said, you're a well outspoken guy and
well, thank you.
really
You too.
really great podcast hosting. Well, I try to be,
Thank you.
but yeah. So love to have you back on for part two, and we can dive deeper into your courses as well, Mike. Again, thank you for your time and dedication to come back on the show. I know you're very busy in the summer, like you said, and when it gets closer to the fall, you'll probably get more busier. So appreciate your time today and for your service again. Thank you for your service, and we'll we'll be in touch.
Thank you. Absolutely.
All right, everyone. That's Mike Creavey, and we'll see you next time on Catholic Table Talk podcast. This is the podcast where I think Catholic is on the table.